The morning of my 80th birthday dawned with the kind of quiet that only comes when the world feels like it's holding its breath. The sunlight slipped through the curtains of my small, weathered house in Willow Creek, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of black coffee, the steam curling upward like a memory. 80 years. The number felt like a stone in my pocket, heavy, but not unwelcome. I'd carried a lot in my time, and today, I thought, might just be the day to lay some of it down. My name is Henry Callahan, and I've lived in this house for nearly half a century. It's the kind of place that creaks with stories, every scuff on the floor, every nick in the walls, a testament to the life I built with my late wife, Margaret, and our 3 children, Emily, Thomas, and Sarah. The kids are grown now, scattered across the country with lives of their own, and Margaret's been gone for 12 years. The house feels bigger without her laughter, without the clatter of little feet or the hum of her sewing machine. But I've learned to live with the silence, to fill it with small rituals: coffee at dawn, the morning paper, a walk to the mailbox. Today, though, was different. It was my 80th birthday, a milestone I hadn't expected to reach when I was young and reckless, driving too fast down country roads or working long hours at the mill. I'd outlived my own expectations, and I wanted to share this day with my children. So, a month ago, I'd called each of them: Emily in Chicago, Thomas in Seattle, Sarah in Atlanta. I'd kept my voice light, hopeful, asking if they could come home for a quiet celebration. One by one, they'd apologized. Work, they said. Deadlines, meetings, soccer games for the grandkids. We'll make it up to you, Dad, Emily had promised. Her voice rushed. Thomas had sent a text: sorry, Dad. Swamped. Happy birthday, though, Sarah had called, her tone warm but distracted, saying she'd try to visit soon. I wasn't angry. Disappointed, maybe, but not angry. They had their lives, and I'd always told them to chase what mattered to them. Still, the quiet of the house felt sharper today, like a note held too long. I sipped my coffee, staring at the single birthday card on the tablier, generic one from the pharmacy, signed by my neighbor, Mrs. Ellis. It was kind, but it wasn't the same. By mid-morning, I decided I wouldn't let the day pass in solitude. If my kids were too busy, I'd find my own way to celebrate. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. 80 years deserved more than a cup of coffee and a quiet house. I stood, my knees creaking as I moved to the living room, where a wooden box sat on the mantel. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, yellowed and fragile, written by Margaret over the years. She'd been a writer at heart, always jotting down her thoughts, her dreams, her love for me and the kids. After she passed, I'd kept every one, reading them when the loneliness grew too heavy. I opened the box, running my fingers over the envelopes. One caught my eye, its edges worn from years of handling. It was dated September 12th, 1975, my 30th birthday. Margaret had written it while I was at the mill, describing a surprise she'd planned for me that night, a picnic by the creek. Just the 2 of us, with homemade pie and a bottle of cheap wine. I smiled, the memory flooding back. That was the kind of woman she was, always finding ways to make the ordinary extraordinary. As I read, an idea took root. Margaret had always said life was about making your own moments, not waiting for them to come to you. If my kids couldn't be here, I'd honor my 80th the way Margaret would have a be, creating something meaningful. I didn't know what yet, but I felt a spark, a flicker of purpose. I tucked the letter back into the box and grabbed my coat. The day was young, and Willow Creek was full of possibilities. I stepped outside, the autumn air crisp against my skin. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. But it had a heart that beat steady and true. I walked down Main Street, passing the diner where Margaret and I used to share milkshakes, the hardware store where I'd bought tools to fix the porch, the park where the kids had played. Each step felt like a conversation with the past. And with every memory, the spark grew brighter. At the community center, I paused. A flyer on the bulletin board caught my eye. Willow Creek Harvest Festival. Volunteers needed. The festival was tonight. A yearly tradition with music, food, and lanterns lighting up the night. I'd gone every year with Margaret, and later with the kids. But I hadn't been since she passed. The thought of it now felt right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. I didn't know what I'd do there, but I knew I needed to be part of it. Maybe, just maybe, that was where my real celebration would begin. I tore off the flyer's phone number and slipped it into my pocket. As I walked home, the weight of the morning lifted. My kids might be busy, but I wasn't alone, not really. Margaret's letters. The town I'd called home for decades. The memories woven into every corner, they were all here with me. And tonight, I'd find a way to make my 80th birthday something worth remembering. The community center was a hive of activity by the time I arrived that afternoon. The air buzzed with the chatter of volunteers, the clatter of tables being set up, and the faint strum of a guitar being tuned for the evening's performance. I stood in the doorway, clutching the flyer, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. At 80, I wasn't sure what I could offer, but the spark from earlier urged me forward. I wasn't here to sit on the sidelines. A young woman with a clipboard and a bright smile approached me. "Hi there. I'm Clara, the festival coordinator. Are you here to volunteer?" Her voice was warm, her eyes curious as they took in my silver hair and weathered hands. "Henry Callahan," I said, extending a hand. "Saw your flyer. Thought I'd help out." Clara's face lit up. "We'd love that. Henry, we're short on hands for the lantern station. It's simple, just helping folks decorate paper lanterns before we light them tonight. Think you're up for it?" I nodded, surprised at how easily I slipped into the role. The lantern station was a small table piled with colored paper, markers, and string. Clara showed me how to fold the lanterns, her hands moving with practiced ease. I fumbled at first, my fingers stiff from years of gripping tools. But soon I found a rhythm. As I worked, people stopped by, kids with sticky fingers, parents juggling snacks, older folks like me who moved a little slower but smiled just as wide. One boy, maybe 10, lingered at the table, his dark eyes fixed on a red lantern. "Can I write something on it?" he asked, his voice shy. "Sure thing," I said, sliding a marker his way. "What's it gonna say?" He hesitated, then scribbled for Grandpa in uneven letters. "He's not here anymore," he said softly. "But Mom says the lanterns carry messages to people we miss." My throat tightened. I thought of Margaret, of her letters waiting at home. "That's a fine idea," I said. "Your grandpa's gonna love it." The boy smiled, small but real, and ran off to join his mom. I watched him go, feeling that spark flare into something warmer, something alive. This was what Margaret meant, making moments, even small ones, that mattered. As the afternoon wore on, more people came by, each with their own stories. A woman my age wrote her husband's name on a lantern, her hands trembling as she told me they'd been married 50 years before he passed. A teenager scrawled a poem, her cheeks flushed with the thrill of creation. Each lantern was a piece of someone's heart, and I was part of it. Folding, tying, listening. It felt like a gift. This chance to connect, to be useful again. By dusk, The festival was in full swing. The park glowed with strings of lights, and the air smelled of cider and roasted corn. Music drifted from a stage where a local band played, their notes weaving through the crowd. I stood at the lantern station, my hands dusted with marker ink, watching families gather to light their creations. Clara handed me a lantern of my own. "You've earned it, Henry," she said. "What's yours going to say?" I hadn't thought about it until that moment. I took a marker and wrote, "For Margaret, always." It was simple, but it held everything me love. My loss, my gratitude for the life we'd shared. As I tied the lantern closed, Clara lit the candle inside, and we released it into the sky. It floated upward, a soft glow against the twilight, joining dozens of others. I watched it climb, my heart full and aching all at once. The night stretched on, alive with laughter and music. I helped clean up the station, stacking and used paper and wiping down the table. Clara offered me a plate of food cornbread and chili, the kind Margaret used to make, and I sat on a bench, eating slowly, savoring the warmth. For the first time all day, I didn't feel the weight of my kids' absence. I was surrounded by people, by stories, by the kind of community Margaret and I had always cherished. As I walked home under a sky full of stars, I thought about the letters waiting on my mantel. I'd read another tonight, maybe one from our early years, when the kids were small and the world felt endless. My 80th birthday wasn't what I'd planned, but it was something better, something real. I'd found a way to celebrate, not just for me, but for Margaret, for the town, for the people who'd shared their light with me tonight. Back home, the house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. The festival had left me with a warmth that lingered, like the afterglow of a good fire. I set my coat on the rack and went straight to the mantel, pulling out Margaret's box of letters. The weight of it in my hands was comforting, familiar. I settled into my armchair, the one Margaret used to call Henry's throne, and opened the box. The letter I chose was from 1985, when Emily was 10, Thomas 8, and Sarah just 5. Margaret's handwriting danced across the page, full of her quiet humor and fierce love. "Henry, you should have seen the kids today. Emily's decided she's going to be an astronaut, and she's got Thomas building a rocket out of cardboard boxes. Sarah keeps stealing my scarves to play space princess. I swear, this house is a circus, and you're the ringmaster whether you like it or not. I love you for it. Always." I laughed, the sound soft in the stillness. I could see it so clearly, Emily's determined frown, Thomas's clumsy hands, Sarah twirling in a too big scarf. Those were the years when life felt like a whirlwind. Every day, a new adventure. Margaret had been the glue, holding us together through the chaos. Reading her words now, I felt her presence, as if she were sitting across from me, smiling that knowing smile. The festival had reminded me of her, how she'd always found joy in bringing people together. She'd have loved the lanterns, the way they carried hopes and memories into the sky. I leaned back, the letter resting on my chest, and let my mind wander. My kids might not have been here today, but they were part of me, part of this house, part of the life Margaret and I had built. Maybe they were busy, but that didn't mean they didn't care. I decided to call them tomorrow, not to guilt them, but to share what I'd found tonight, a celebration that wasn't about me, but about connection. The next morning, I woke early, the ache in my joints a little sharper after yesterday's activity. But I felt alive, purposeful. I made my usual coffee, then sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. The festival had given me an idea, not just for my birthday, but for something bigger. Willow Creek was full of people like me, older folks who lived alone, whose families were far away or gone. What if we could come together, not just for a festival, but regularly? A place to share stories, to laugh, to feel less alone. I started jotting down ideas, a weekly coffee morning at the community center, maybe a book club or a storytelling night. I wasn't much for organizing, but Clara had seemed eager to help, and I knew others would too. Mrs. Ellis, my neighbor, was always talking about her quilting group. Maybe they'd join in. The more I wrote, the more excited I got. This could be my real celebration, not just for my 80th, but for every day I had left. By noon, I was back at the community center, my notepad tucked under my arm. Clara was there, sorting through leftover decorations. "Henry," she called, waving me over. "You were a hit last night." People kept talking about the nice old guy at the lantern station. I chuckled, a little embarrassed. Glad I didn't mess it up. "Listen, I've got an idea. Something for folks like me older, on their own. A way to keep the festival spirit going all year." Clara's eyes lit up as I explained. She grabbed her own notebook, adding ideas of her own guest speakers, craft days, even a gardening club. "This is brilliant, Henry," she said. "The town needs this. Let's make it happen." We spent the afternoon planning, sketching out a schedule, brainstorming names. "Silver connections," Clara suggested, and I liked it. It felt right, like a nod to the silver in my hair and the bonds we'd built. By the time I left, I was buzzing with energy, the kind I hadn't felt in years. I'd come to the festival looking for a way to fill my birthday, but I'd found something more a purpose, a reason to keep going. As I walked home, I passed the park, where a few lanterns still hung in the trees, swaying in the breeze. I thought of Margaret's letter, of her circus metaphor. Maybe I was still the ringmaster. After all, just in a different kind of show. My kids might not have been here, but I was building something they'd be proud of, something that would outlast me. And that, I realized, was the real Celebrat. The weeks that followed my 80th birthday were a blur of activity. Silver connections took shape faster than I'd expected. Clara was a force of nature, rallying volunteers and spreading the word through flyers and the town's weekly newsletter. I found myself at the community center almost daily, helping set up tables, calling local businesses for donations, even speaking at a town hall meeting, something I'd never imagined doing at my age. My voice shook at first, but the crowd's warm applause steadied me. They believed in this, and so did I. The first Silver Connections meeting was set for a crisp October morning. I arrived early, my stomach fluttering with nerves. Would anyone show up? What if this was a foolish old man's dream? But as I set out coffee and pastries donated by the diner, I heard the door creak open. Mrs. Ellis walked in, her quilting bag slung over her shoulder, followed by Mr. Thompson, a retired mechanic who'd lost his wife last year. Soon, the room filled with faces, some familiar, some new. There were 10 of us in all. A small start, but enough to make the space feel alive. We sat in a circle, sipping coffee, sharing stories. Mrs. Ellis talked about her quilting, how it kept her hands busy and her heart full. Mr. Thompson told us about restoring an old car in his garage, his eyes lighting up as he described the engine's hum. I shared a bit about Margaret, about the letters that had inspired me to start this. The room grew quiet, but it wasn't the heavy silence of loneliness. It was the kind that comes when people truly listen. By the end of the meeting, we'd planned a storytelling night for the next week. Everyone agreed to bring something, a memory, a photo, a keepsake. I left the center feeling lighter than I had in years. This was what I'd been missing, not just on my birthday, but for so long, a sense of belonging, of mattering to someone beyond my own walls. At home, I called my kids. Emily answered first, her voice brighter than the last time we'd spoken. "Dad, I'm so sorry about your birthday," she said. "I saw the festival pictures on the town's website. You were there." I told her about the lanterns, about silver connections, about the people I'd met. She listened, really listened, and when I finished, she said, "That sounds like Mom's kind of thing. I'm proud of you, Dad." Thomas and Sarah were the same, apologetic, curious, excited. They promised to visit soon, to see what I was building. I didn't push them. I knew they'd come when they could. For now, it was enough to hear their voices, to know they were part of this, even from afar. The storytelling night was a success. The community center was packed, not just with our little group, but with younger folks, two Clara's friends, neighbors, even some kids from the festival. We passed around photos, read letters, told stories of first loves and old dreams. I read one of Margaret's letters, the one from 1975 about our picnic. The room was silent, then erupted in soft laughter when I described how I'd spilled wine on my shirt that night. It felt like Margaret was there, her warmth filling the space. As the weeks turned into months, silver connections grew. We added a gardening club, a book group, even a weekly walk in the park. I found myself looking forward to each meeting, to the faces that had become friends. There was Ruth, who taught me how to make her famous apple pie, and George, who played chess with a ruthless grin. Each person brought something new, a piece of themselves that made the group stronger. My kids started calling more often, asking about the group, about the town. Sarah sent a box of books for the book club, and Thomas mailed a set of gardening tools. Emily promised to bring her kids for the next festival. It wasn't just about my birthday, Anna Maria. It was about building something lasting, something that could hold us all together, even when we were apart. One evening, as I sat with Margaret's letters, I realized how far I'd come since that quiet morning on my 80th. I'd been hurt by my kids' absence, but I'd found a way to turn that hurt into something beautiful. Margaret would have been proud, I thought, and that was enough. I closed the box, my heart full, and looked out at the stars. The real celebration wasn't just one day, it was every day I chose to keep going, to keep connecting, to keep loving. Winter settled over Willow Creek, blanketing the town in soft snow. Silver connections had become a fixture, a warm light in the cold months. The community center was our haven, its walls echoing with laughter and stories. I'd started bringing Margaret's letters to the meetings, reading one aloud each week. They weren't just for me anymore, they were a gift to the group, a way to share the woman who'd shaped so much of my life. The others began bringing their own keepsakes, old photos, handwritten recipes, even a faded love letter from Ruth's high school sweetheart. Each piece was a thread, weaving us closer together. One snowy afternoon, Clara pulled me aside. "Henry, we've been talking," she said, her eyes bright with mischief. "The group wants to do something special for you, for starting all this." I waved her off, embarrassed. "This isn't about me, Clara. It's about all of us." She grinned. "Too late. It's happening. Next week, at the storytelling night. Don't argue." I didn't know what to expect, but I trusted Clara. The next week, I arrived at the community center to find the room transformed. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, their soft glow reminiscent of the festival. A banner stretched across the wall. "Thank you, Henry." My throat tightened as I took it in, the tables laden with food, the faces of friends, the warmth of a room filled with gratitude. Ruth handed me a quilt, pieced together by the group. Each square was embroidered with a name, a date, a memory from our meetings. "This is for you," she said, her voice soft, for giving us a place to belong. I couldn't speak for a moment, my eyes stinging. I ran my fingers over the stitches, feeling the weight of their care. I didn't do this alone. I managed. You all made it real. The night was a blur of stories, laughter, and music. George played his guitar, and Clara led a sing-along of old folk songs. I read a letter from Margaret, one I'd never shared before, written the day Sarah was born. Henry, we made a family. She'd written, no matter what comes, we'll always have this. I looked around the room, at the faces lit by candlelight, and realized I'd made another kind of family here. When I got home, I called my kids again. This time, they had news. Emily was planning a trip with her husband and kids for the spring. Thomas had booked a flight for the summer, and Sarah was bringing her whole family for the next festival. We want to see what you've built, Dad, Sarah said. It sounds like home. I hung up, my heart full. I'd spent so long missing them, missing Margaret, that I'd forgotten how to look forward. Silver Connections had changed that. It wasn't just about filling the silent site, it was about creating something new, something that could grow even after I was gone. The months rolled on, each meeting bringing new faces, new stories. We started a memory book, a collection of everyone's contributions, letters, recipes, poems. Clara suggested we publish it, donate the proceeds to the community center. I liked the idea of leaving something behind, a piece of Willow Creek's heart for the next generation. One evening, as I walked home through the snow, I stopped at the park. The lanterns from the festival were long gone, but the memory of them lingered. I thought of Margaret, of the life we'd shared, of the kids who were finding their way back to me. My 80th birthday had been the start of something I hadn't expected, a reminder that life doesn't stop at 80, or at any age, as long as you keep reaching out. I pulled my coat tighter and smiled. The real celebration wasn't one day, one party, one moment. It was this every step, every story, every connection that made the world a little brighter. Margaret had taught me that, and I was finally living it. Spring arrived in Willow Creek, painting the town with bursts of green and gold. Silver Connections had grown beyond what I'd imagined 20 regular members now, with new faces at every meeting. The memory book was nearly finished, its pages thick with stories and love. I'd taken to carrying a small notebook of my own, jotting down moments I didn't want to forget: Ruth's laugh, George's terrible puns, Clara's endless energy. At 80, I'd learned that memories were the real treasure, and I was rich with them. One morning, as I sipped my coffee, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Emily, her husband, and their 2 kids standing on the porch, suitcases in hand. Surprise, Emily said, her smile wide. Before I could react, Thomas and Sarah appeared behind her, their families in tow. My kids, my grandkids, all here, filling the porch with laughter and chaos. Dad, we couldn't miss this, Sarah said, hugging me tight. We heard about Silver Connections. We wanted to see it for ourselves. I was speechless, my eyes blurring as I took them in. The house, so quiet for so long, came alive again that day. The kids ran through the backyard, chasing each other like their parents once did. Emily helped me make coffee. Thomas fixed a loose porch step, and Sarah sorted through Margaret's letters, reading them aloud to her own kids. It was the kind of day I dreamed of on my 80th birthday, but hadn't dared hope for. That evening, we all went to the community center for a Silver Connections meeting. The group welcomed my family like they were their own, sharing stories and passing around the quilt. My grandkids decorated lanterns, giggling as they wrote messages to Margaret, their grandmother they'd never met. We love you, Grandma, One wrote, and I felt my heart swell. Clara stood up halfway through the night, tapping a spoon against her glass. This group started because of Henry, she said, her voice carrying over the room. He reminded us that it's never too late to build something, to make a difference. So tonight, we're celebrating him not just for his birthday, but for every day he's given us. The room erupted in applause, and I felt my face flush. Emily squeezed my hand, and Thomas gave me a nod, his eyes proud. Sarah whispered, "Mom would love this. Dad." And she was right. Margaret was here, in the laughter, in the lanterns, in the love that filled the room. We ended the night with a lantern release, just like the festival. My grandkids ran through the grass, watching their creations float into the sky. I lit one last lantern, writing for Margaret, for us, for always. As it rose, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. My kids were here. My new family was here. And I was exactly where I was meant to be. The next day, as my kids packed to leave, they promised to come back soon. "This isn't just your celebration, Dad," Emily said. "It's ours too. We're part of it now." I watched them drive away, my heart full but not heavy. The house was quiet again, but it held the echo of their voices, their laughter. I sat at the kitchen table, opening Margaret's box one more time. I didn't read a letter this time. I didn't need to. I could feel her with me, in every moment I'd created since my 80th birthday. Silver connections kept growing, and so did I. At 80, I'd found a new chapter, one I hadn't expected but was grateful to live. My real celebration wasn't about one day, it was about a life built on love, loss, and the courage to keep going. As I looked out at the town I'd called home for so long, I knew this was only the beginning. There were more stories to tell, more lanterns to light, more connections to make, and I was ready for everyone.